They laughed when I wore my uniform. They called me a desk pilot, a shadow of real military. But that night, when a SEAL stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine and whispered two words that made the entire backyard fall silent. Respect, Captain. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They never saw me in the fire. They never knew the desk pilot they mocked was the one who flew through hell to bring their heroes home. Tonight, their laughter would end. My name is Clara Monroe, and I've flown through enemy fire more times than my brother has lifted weights at his gym. But sitting here at my parents' backyard in Coastal Springs, South Carolina, watching the Atlantic shimmer under the summer sun, you'd never know it. To them, I'm just the daughter who plays pilot, while Ryan, my older brother, is the real warrior. The smell of Dad's barbecue mixed with salt air as relatives gathered around picnic tables draped in red, white, and blue. 4th of July had always been Ryan's show. 5 years in the SEALs before a training injury ended his career, and now he ran a CrossFit gym called Trident Fitness. Every family gathering, he wore his old team shirt like armor, retelling stories everyone had heard a dozen times. Clara's back, Aunt Martha announced, and heads turned briefly before returning to their conversations. No heroes welcome, no questions about my deployment, just polite nods and comments about how thin I looked in my flight suit. Ryan stood at the center of the deck, beer in hand, his audience captivated. So there we were, middle of Hell Week, instructors screaming, I'd heard this story before, we all had. But they hung on every word like scripture while I sat quietly, fingers tracing condensation on my untouched beer bottle. Good to have both kids home, Dad said, clapping Ryan's shoulder. Your mother worries, especially about Ryan here doing all that dangerous training. Mom nodded, touching Ryan's arm. Thank God you're safe now, teaching civilians instead of, well, you know. They didn't even look at me. The F-16 pilot who'd logged over 2,000 combat hours, the one who'd earned call sign Revenant Eagle for coming back from missions others wouldn't attempt. Ryan raised his beer, voice cutting through the chatter. A toast to all the warriors here and to Clara, our desk pilot, keeping America's paperwork safe. The laughter hit like shrapnel. Cousins chuckled, uncles grinned. Even Mom smiled as if it were endearing. Ryan winked at me, that same condescending look he'd perfected since we were kids. Air Force, he continued, where the biggest danger is a paper cut. Right. Sis. I stayed silent, my jaw locked, muscles remembering the G-forces that tried to tear them apart. They didn't know about the mission 3 months ago, classified Operation Iron Veil, where I led a flight of 4 through a wall of surface-to-air missiles to provide cover for an extraction. They didn't know the team I saved was SEAL Team 7. They didn't know one of those SEALs was Commander Peter Graves Ryan's former CO, his hero, his gold standard of masculinity. Come on, Clara, Cousin Jake called out. Tell us a story from the chair force. More laughter. Ryan basked in it, arms crossed, tribal tattoo gleaming with sunscreen. I stood slowly, walked to the cooler, pulled out another beer I wouldn't drink. The ocean stretched beyond our property line, endless and indifferent. In my peripheral vision, I caught Dad shaking his head slightly, as if embarrassed by his quiet daughter who couldn't take a joke. They wanted stories. I had stories. Stories of pulling 9 Gs until blood vessels burst in my eyes. Stories of landing with half my hydraulics gone and prayers on my lips. Stories of voices crackling through comms, begging for air support, and being the only one close enough to answer. But classification levels and security clearances meant silence. So I stood there, watching the waves, listening to Ryan describe his almost deployment that never happened, his close call that was a training exercise, his glory that lived entirely in the past tense and gym mirrors. You okay, sweetie? Mom appeared beside me, voice lowered like she was approaching something fragile. Fine, Mom. Ryan doesn't mean anything by it. You know how military brothers are? They joke differently. I wanted to tell her that Ryan left the teams before earning his trident, that his combat experience was 3 training rotations. that the closest he'd come to real danger was a bar fight in Virginia Beach. But Peter Graves had made sure those details stayed buried, protecting his protégé's reputation even after Ryan washed out. I know. Mom. She patted my shoulder, gentle, dismissive, the way you'd comfort a child who'd lost at kickball. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in combat colors of orange and red, I made a silent promise to myself. Next time they laughed, I wouldn't stay quiet. Next time they mocked the desk pilot, I'd tell them exactly who pulled their heroes from the fire. But not tonight. Tonight, I'd watch Ryan perform his worn-out war stories. I'd endure the jokes, the dismissive glances, the assumption that my wings were made of paper. The ocean knew the truth. And soon, so would they. The memory hit me at 3:15 a.m., pulling me from sleep like a combat alarm. Operation Iron Veil. 6 months ago, though it felt like yesterday. I sat up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old trophies Ryan had stored here, his way of marking territory even in my space. I couldn't shake the images, the radar lighting up like Christmas in hell. 4 F-16s against a forest of SAM sites, and below us, 7 SEALs pinned down in a canyon, their extraction helicopter a burning skeleton on the ridge. Revenant Eagle, this is Trident Actual. We're taking heavy fire. How copy that voice? I'd recognized it even through the static and gunfire. Commander Peter Graves Ryan's mythical mentor, the man whose stories had dominated every family dinner since Ryan joined the teams. Solid copy. Trident. Package inbound. Danger close. Mark your position with IR. What followed was 18 minutes of the most intense flying of my career. We dove through coordinated missile launches, each of us pulling 9+ Gs repeatedly, trading altitude for speed, speed for angle, angle for survival. My wingman, Captain Torres, took shrapnel through his canopy but stayed in formation. We carved a corridor of destruction through enemy positions, dropping precision munitions so close to friendlies that one mistake would have made us the killers, not the saviors. Revenant. Trident, you're dropping danger close to our position. Copy that. Suggest you keep your heads down. The explosion lifted dust and debris 200 feet. When it cleared, the enemy guns had gone silent. The extraction bird came in hot, and 7 SEALs made it home. 3 days later, I was summoned to a secure facility at MacDill Air Force Base. Peter Graves stood there in his dress blues, chest heavy with ribbons that told real stories, not Ryan's fabrications. Captain Monroe. He didn't salute we were the same rank, technically, though his reputation dwarfed mine. You saved my entire team. Just doing my job, Commander. He studied me for a long moment. You're Ryan's sister. Yes, sir. Something shifted in his expression, a calculation, maybe, or disappointment. He speaks highly of his time with the teams. We both knew Ryan had washed out of Bud S twice before getting pushed through on his 3rd attempt, only to be quietly removed after a year for medical reasons that everyone knew were performance-related. Peter had been his advocate, pulling strings, writing letters, the father figure Ryan never had in our actual father. Commander, about Ryan. He doesn't know about this mission. Peter interrupted. Classified. Need to know. Of course. But then he said something that planted a seed of anger that had been growing ever since. Your brother. He needs his heroes, his stories. It's all he has now. Peter's jaw tightened. I couldn't let him feel small. You understand, don't you? You're strong enough to carry this quietly. Strong enough. Code for you're a woman. You're used to being overlooked. So what's one more silence? I understand, Commander. But I didn't. Not really. I understood that Peter Graves would rather protect Ryan's ego than acknowledge who really held the line that day. I understood that my silence was the price for Ryan's pride. I understood that even in the military, even after earning my wings through the same programs, flying the same aircraft, facing the same no worse dangers, I was expected to step aside for the comfort of men who couldn't handle being saved by a woman. The secure phone in my apartment had rung 2 weeks ago. Peter again. Clara, I heard you're going home for the 4th. Yes, sir. Ryan will be there. He's struggling. The gym isn't doing well. His engagement ended. He needs his hero intact. I finished. Silence. Then, you saved 7 lives. Captain, that should be enough. Should it? Clara, I'd hung up, respectfully, but definitely. Now, sitting in the dark of my old room, I pulled out my flight log. Every mission meticulously recorded in my personal shorthand. Iron Veil took up 3 pages. At the bottom, I'd written 7 souls retrieved, 0 acknowledgement, mission complete. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Master Chief Harlan Tate. Heard you're in Coastal Springs. I was on Graves's team during Iron Veil. Would like to buy you a beer. You saved my life. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Someone else knew. Someone else remembered. Tomorrow, Ryan would probably tell more stories about his glory days. Dad would beam with pride. Mom would worry about the dangers he'd faced. And I would sit there, the desk pilot, the paper warrior, holding the truth like a live grenade with the pin already pulled. But maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be holding it alone. The storage unit smelled like dust and aviation fuel ghost scents that never really leave you. I'd rented it years ago, 10 minutes from my parents' house, a place to keep things that didn't fit in their neat narrative of who their daughter was supposed to be. I pulled out the metal lockbox, fingers finding the combination by muscle memory. Inside, my real life lay documented in careful handwriting, flight logs, mission reports, and the journal I'd kept through every deployment, every close call, every moment when death kissed my wings and let me pass. The entry from Iron Veil was water-stained. I'd been crying when I wrote it, though I'd never admit that to anyone. March 15th, 0200 hours. Can't sleep. Hands won't stop shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Saved 7 souls today. One of them was Peter Graves, Ryan's hero, Ryan's father figure, Ryan's everything. He looked me in the eye afterward and asked me to stay quiet. For Ryan. Always for Ryan. I flipped pages, reading my own evolution from eager lieutenant to hardened captain. June 3rd. Suffered G-lock today. Gravity-induced loss of consciousness. Came to inverted at 8,000 feet. Nobody will ever know how close I came to dying. Certainly not my family, who think I fly cargo planes. September 21st. Lost my wingman today. Lieutenant Sarah Chen took a direct hit. Ejected too late. I watched her parachute burn. Mom called tonight to say Ryan got a promotion at his gym. I congratulated him and said nothing about Sarah. December 1st. Awarded Distinguished Flying Cross. Ceremony was classified. Couldn't even tell Dad. He spent dinner talking about Ryan's new girlfriend, how she was impressed by his military service. I excused myself to vomit. Claimed it was food poisoning. The pages blurred. So many missions. So many secrets. So many times I'd bitten my tongue until it bled rather than steal Ryan's spotlight. But there was one entry I kept coming back to, written 3 years ago after another family gathering where Ryan had held court with his tales of almost glory. They laugh at me, call me chair force, mock my service, and I let them because the alternative is destroying Ryan. But what about me? When do I get to exist? When do I get to be more than the silent keeper of his inadequacy? I found the sealed envelope at the bottom of the box. My copy of the Iron Veil After Action report, officially redacted but privately complete. Every detail, every radio call, every second of those 18 minutes when I'd threaded my flight through hell to save men who would never publicly thank me. Master Chief Tate's text still glowed on my phone. Someone wanted to thank me. Someone remembered. I pulled out a fresh notebook and began writing. July 4th? Today? They laughed again. Ryan raised his beer and called me a desk pilot. Mom smiled. Dad looked embarrassed. But something has changed. I'm done being their secret keeper. Done being the silent professional while Ryan plays dress-up in his old team shirts? I've carried this weight for years, thinking silence was strength. But I've realized something: my silence isn't protecting anyone. It's enabling them. Ryan gets to live in his fantasy because I allow it. Peter Graves gets to play puppet master because I comply. My parents get to have their war hero son because I disappear. No more. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Master Chief Tate. Tomorrow, 5 p.m., the Sandbar on Ocean Boulevard. Then I opened my laptop and began composing an email to my squadron commander. Subject line: request to discuss public recognition. Waiver for Operation Iron Veil. The classification on Iron Veil was loosening. It had to, as the conflict moved into history. There was a process for declassification, for allowing service members to claim their actions. I'd never pursued it before, never wanted to rock the boat. But boats were meant to rock. That's how they moved forward. I pulled out my dress uniform, hanging it carefully in the storage unit where I could retrieve it tomorrow. Every ribbon in place, every insignia earned. The distinguished flying cross centered above my heart, the one Ryan didn't even know existed. Tomorrow, when Ryan started his stories, when the family gathered to worship at the altar of his manufactured masculinity, I wouldn't interrupt. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't even contradict him. I'd just meet with Master Chief Tate, let him tell his truth, let him speak the words that Peter Graves had swallowed. And maybe, if Tate was willing, he'd come to the next family gathering, not to embarrass Ryan, that wasn't the point, but to finally let me exist in my own story. The journal entry ended with a single line: silence is not strength, silence is complicity, and I'm done being complicit in my own erasure. I locked the storage unit and drove home through empty streets, the sunrise painting the sky in the same colors as missile exhaust. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the desk pilot would finally show them what real wings looked like, even if it meant watching Ryan's fantasy crash and burn. 2 years had passed since that 4th of July. 2 years of deployments, missions, and more classified operations that would never make it into Ryan's repertoire of gym stories. Now I was back again, standing in the same backyard, watching the same Atlantic waves. But everything inside me had changed. The Independence Day party was bigger this year. Ryan had invited his entire gym crew, muscled disciples who hung on his every word about operational mindset and warrior mentality. He'd franchised Trident Fitness, riding his fabricated reputation into a small empire of testosterone and false valor. I wore my service dress uniform. Not the flight suit they'd mocked before, but the full formal blue with every ribbon displayed. Ryan noticed immediately. "Whoa, Clara went all out," he announced to his audience. "That uniform's cute. Does it come with air conditioning?" The laughter rippled through his followers. One of them, a young guy with a fresh seal trident tattoo, probably never served a day, whistled. Chair Force representing. I sipped my water, said nothing. The distinguished flying cross caught the afternoon sun. Ryan was in the middle of his favorite story, the one about Hell Week, which he'd never actually completed when a voice cut through the performance. "Hold up." Everyone turned. A man stood at the gate-weathered face, alert eyes, the kind of posture that didn't need to announce itself. Master Chief Harlan Tate. He'd texted me that morning, said he had business in Coastal Springs. I hadn't expected him to show up here. "Sorry to interrupt," Tate said, stepping into the yard. "Looking for someone." His eyes found mine, then shifted to my uniform, reading the ribbons like a resume. "Holy shit, you're Clara Monroe, Revenant Eagle." The yard went silent. Even the waves seemed to pause. Ryan laughed nervously. "You know my sister." Tate's expression hardened. "Your sister." He looked between us, piecing something together. "You're Ryan Monroe. Graves talked about you." "Yeah." Ryan puffed up. "Commander Graves was my mentor. We served together in—" "No." Tate interrupted. "You didn't. I've been on Team 7 for 15 years. You were never operational with us." The air crackled. Ryan's gym bros shifted uncomfortably. I don't know who you are, buddy, but Master Chief Harlan Tate, SEAL Team 7, and I know exactly who your sister is. He turned to me. You saved Graves's team. You saved my life. Operation Iron Veil. Mom dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the deck. That's classified, I said quietly. Was classified. Declassified last month. We can talk about it now. Tate stepped closer, his voice carrying across the silent yard. 6 of us were going to die in that canyon. Extraction bird was down. Enemy had us pinned. Then 4 F-16s came screaming through the most intense SAM coverage I've ever seen. The lead pilot call sign Revenant Eagle put ordnance danger close to our position, so close we could feel the heat. Dad had moved closer, mouth open. Ryan stood frozen. The flying I witnessed that day, Tate continued, was the most precise balls-out display of air support in SEAL Team 7's history. We tried to put her in for a Silver Star, but the operation was too classified. Settled for a Distinguished Flying Cross? He pointed at my chest. That one right there. But, Ryan's voice cracked. She's just what Tate's tone could have cut steel. Just the pilot who flew through hell so your precious Commander Graves could come home. Just the one who saved 7 operators when everyone else said it was impossible. The sliding door opened. I hadn't heard the car arrive, hadn't noticed the footsteps. But there he was, Commander Peter Graves himself, dressed in civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing. Peter, Mom whispered. Graves looked at me, then at Ryan, then at the ground. I heard Tate was in town. Figured he'd end up here. Commander, Ryan started, desperate. Tell them about stop. Graves raised a hand. Just stop. Ryan. He turned to face the gathering, shoulders squared. Clara Monroe saved my life, saved my entire team. She flew through conditions that would have grounded most pilots, took risks that should have killed her, and brought us home. Why didn't you ever say anything? Dad's voice was barely audible. Graves met my eyes. Because I was protecting the wrong person. I thought I was helping Ryan by preserving his narrative, but all I did was enable a lie while silencing a hero. Ryan's face had gone from red to white. His gym bros backed away like weakness was contagious. You knew, Ryan turned on Graves. You knew she was the one who saved my life. Yes, who earned more real combat distinction in one afternoon than you did in your entire abbreviated career. Yes. Graves's voice was flat, factual, devastating. You washed out, Ryan, twice. I pulled strings to get you a 3rd chance, and you couldn't hack it. Your medical discharge was a favor, not an injury. The words hung in the air like ordnance waiting to drop. Ryan looked at me, his world collapsing in real time. You could have said something. I finally spoke. I did. Every time I wore this uniform, every time I came home, you just never bothered to read what was right in front of you. The silence stretched until Tate broke it. There's something else. The rest of the team wanted to be here, but they're deployed. They sent this. He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen. A video played 6 SEALs in combat gear, somewhere sandy and dangerous. Captain Monroe, they said in unison. Respect. Then, one by one, they saluted. The video ended. 6 SEALs, somewhere in a combat zone, had taken time to record their gratitude. The phone screen went dark, but nobody moved. The backyard had become a courtroom, and the verdict had just been delivered. Ryan's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. His gym bros had retreated to the edges of the yard, their phones out, probably deleting photos they'd taken with their SEAL mentor. Peter Graves stood rigid, the weight of his confession still settling. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, like the truth had aged him in minutes. You knew, Dad said, his voice rising. You both knew my daughter was a hero, and you let us mock her. Peter started to speak, but I raised my hand. My turn. They weren't the only ones who knew. I said, my voice steady as a landing approach. I knew. I chose to stay quiet. At first. Clara. Mom began. No, let me finish. I looked at Ryan. His eyes were wet, whether from rage or shame. I couldn't tell. You owe me nothing, Ryan. Not an apology, not recognition, nothing. But I never wanted your apology. The words came out clean, surgical. Just your honesty. I turned to Peter, and you, Commander. You thought you were protecting him, but you were just protecting yourself, your image as the perfect mentor, your story of the damaged protege you tried to save. Peter's jaw clenched. Captain Monroe, I'm not finished. My voice carried the authority of every mission, every G-force, every second I'd spent dancing with death while they played their games of pretend. You want to know what I wanted just once. I wanted to come home and not have to pretend I was less than I am. Just once. I wanted my parents to know their daughter flies combat missions. Just once. I wanted to exist in my own family. Ryan stepped forward, fists clenched. You could have. What destroyed your entire identity, revealed that your warrior mythology was built on medical discharges and washed-out attempts? I shook my head. I'm not that cruel. Ryan, but I'm also not that generous anymore. I walked to the table where my parents stood frozen. Mom had tears streaming down her face. Dad looked like someone had died. Your son needed his fantasy, I said softly, but your daughter needed her family. Guess which one you chose? We didn't know, Mom whispered, because you didn't want to know. Every time you laughed at the chair force jokes, every time you dismissed my service, you were choosing not to know. I pulled out my phone, showing them a photo. See this. That's me standing next to my F-16 after Iron Veil. See the battle damage, the shrapnel holes I landed that bird with half my control surfaces gone. Dad reached for the phone, hands shaking. But sure, I continued, tell everyone how worried you were about Ryan's safe gym job, how proud you were of his fake war stories. Master Chief Tate cleared his throat. With respect, Captain, they should know the rest. I nodded. Your daughter has flown 37 combat missions that we know of. She's been shot at more times than most infantry see in a career. She's saved not just our team, but 3 different Marine units, a convoy of British forces, and God knows who else. Tate's voice hardened. And she did it all while you were treating her like she was playing dress-up. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then, from the back of the yard, one of Ryan's gym bros started slow clapping. Others joined, not mocking genuine. They'd come to worship a false idol and found themselves in the presence of something real. Ryan's face crumbled. Stop! Just stop! The clapping died. I looked at my brother, really looked at him for the first time in years, saw past the muscles and tattoos to the frightened kid who'd wanted so badly to be special that he'd built an entire life on lies. I never wanted to humiliate you, I said. That's why I kept quiet for so long. But now I'm done keeping secrets that aren't mine to keep. I straightened my uniform. Every ribbon a story they'd never bothered to hear. I'm done pretending to be less so you can feel like more. Peter Graves stepped forward. Clara's right. I failed both of you. Ryan, I let you live a lie. Clara, I asked you to sacrifice your truth for his comfort. That ends now. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly. I'm sending a letter to the base commander at MacDill, recommending Captain Monroe for public recognition of her actions during Iron Veil and subsequent operations. It's long overdue. Don't, I said. I don't need your... It's not about what you need. Peter interrupted. It's about what you've earned. I gathered my things, my cover, my dignity, my truth. I'm leaving now. Not because I'm running, but because I've said what needed saying. As I walked toward the gate, Tate fell into step beside me. Behind us, the party collapsed into whispers and recriminations. Ryan's voice, broken and small, called out, "Clara, wait!" I paused at the gate, looked back. I waited 2 years. Ryan, I'm done waiting. The ocean breeze carried the sound of my family's world reorganizing itself around a new truth. I didn't stay to watch. I'd already seen enough. The beach was empty except for the gulls and the ghosts of every silence I'd ever swallowed. I'd walked here after leaving the party, needing the ocean's indifference to wash away the sound of my family's shock. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of flame that reminded me of tracer fire. I sat on a piece of driftwood, still in my dress uniform, sand already finding its way into my shoes. The Atlantic stretched endless before me, the same view from childhood. But I was no longer the girl who'd watched these waves dreaming of flight. I was the woman who'd conquered the sky and returned to Earth unrecognized. Footsteps in sand, measured, deliberate. I knew without looking it was Tate. "Mind if I join you?" "Captain." I gestured to the log. He sat, maintaining that respectful distance operators always kept, close enough to talk, far enough to move if needed. "Hell of a thing back there," he said. "Had to happen eventually." "Did it?" I turned to look at him. His face was weathered by winds from 100 insertions, eyes that had seen the worst and chosen to continue anyway. "You could have kept quiet forever," he continued. "Lot of us do. Lot of classified heroes out there, drinking alone, carrying stories that would change how people see them. Is that what you think I am? A hero?" Tate was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a challenge coin. Not just any coin, a SEAL Team 7 coin, scratched and worn from years of carry. "You know what this means? It's your unit coin." "It's more than that." He turned it over in his hands. "Every operator on that team has one. We've jumped into hell with these in our pockets. They've been covered in blood, mud, fear, triumph. They mean we're part of something." He held it out to me. "I can't take that." "You earned it." His voice was steady, certain. "Every member of that team voted, unanimous. You're one of us, Captain. Not because you're a SEAL, you're not. But because when we were dead, men walking, you flew into hell and pulled us out." I took the coin. It was heavier than I expected, warm from his pocket. "There's something else," Tate said, his voice dropping. "Something I need you to hear." I waited. When we were pinned in that canyon, when the extraction bird went down, when the enemy was closing in, we made peace with dying. All of us. Said our prayers, thought of home, prepared for the end. He paused, eyes on the horizon. "Then we heard your jets." The memory of that day washed over me, the radio chatter, the missile locks, the impossible angle of attack we'd chosen. "Peter's one of our guys, he was crying. Not from fear, from relief. Because he recognized what you were doing, the approach vector, the speed he knew you were setting up for a danger-close run. Knew you were risking everything. It was my job." "No." Tate's voice hardened. "Your job was to provide air support from a safe altitude. What you did diving through that SAM envelope, pulling 9Gs repeatedly, putting ordnance so close we could feel our teeth rattle, that wasn't the job. That was sacrifice." A gull cried overhead, wheeling against the darkening sky. "You want to know what Peter said when you pulled out of that final run?" I nodded. He said, "That pilot just traded years of their life for ours. The G-forces alone probably took time off their body." Tate turned to me. "He was right, wasn't he?" "You've had issues since. Medical evaluations, flight restrictions." I unconsciously touched my neck, where the compression injuries still ached on cold mornings. "Some. And you never said anything, never played that card, never used it to defend yourself when they mocked you. What would be the point?" Tate stood, brushed sand from his jeans. Then, in the fading light of the beach, with only the ocean as witness, he came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. "Respect, Captain." The words hit different here. away from the chaos of the party, away from Ryan's crumbling facade and my parents' shock. Here, they were pure, uncomplicated, true. I stood, returned the salute properly. "There's going to be a ceremony," he said, dropping the salute. "At MacDill. The team wants to formally recognize you. Public event. Press invited." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not for you, but it's necessary for us. We've carried this debt for 2 years. Time to pay it properly." He started to leave, then turned back. "Your brother, he's an ass, but he's also destroyed right now. What you did back there, revealing the truth that took a different kind of courage. Did it, or was I just tired of carrying his lie? Both can be true." Tate smiled slightly. "Warriors understand that. The weight of truth can be heavier than any pack." He walked away, leaving me alone with the coin in the ocean. I turned the coin over in my hands, feeling every scratch, every dent. Somewhere, 6 other operators carried identical coins, and now I was part of that fraternity, not by training or selection, but by action when action mattered most. I stood there until the stars came out, until the moon painted a silver path across the water. Behind me, I could imagine my family's house in chaos, Ryan dealing with his exposed fiction, my parents processing their blindness, Peter Graves facing his enabling. But here, on this beach, with this coin in my pocket and those 2 words, "Respect Captain," still echoing in my ears, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Visible. The knock came at 11:45 p.m. I'd been sitting in my hotel room, still processing the evening, when I heard it deliberate, hesitant. Through the peephole, Peter Graves stood in the hallway, looking like he'd aged a decade since the party. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Clara." He couldn't meet my eyes. "May I come in?" "Say what you need to say from there." He nodded, accepting the boundary. I drove around for 3 hours before coming here, kept thinking about what I wanted to say. Apology seemed too small. Explanation seemed too selfish. "So, why are you here?" "Because I need you to understand something." He finally looked up. "It wasn't about protecting Ryan. Not really." I waited. "It was about protecting my image of myself. The mentor. The father figure. The one who could shape broken boys into warriors." His voice cracked. "Ryan was my project. My proof that I could build a SEAL from nothing. When he failed, when he kept failing, I couldn't accept it. And when you succeeded, when you saved us, it destroyed the narrative I'd built. So you buried me to save your ego?" "Yes." The admission came out raw. I told myself it was for Ryan, but that was a lie. A commander who can't make a warrior out of his chosen protege but gets saved by the sister he never chose. That didn't fit my story. I leaned against the doorframe. "You know what the worst part is, Commander." He waited. "I would have kept your secret forever if you'd just asked honestly. If you'd said, 'Clara, I'm struggling with my ego, with my sense of failure.' I would have understood that, but you wrapped it in false nobility, made it about protecting Ryan when it was about protecting yourself." "You're right." He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. "This is everything. The full, unredacted after-action report from Iron Vale. My recommendation letter's the real ones I should have submitted 2 years ago. Documentation of Ryan's actual service record, without the embellishments." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "There's more," he continued. "I've submitted my resignation from the reserves. Can't lead if I can't tell the truth." "That's excessive." "Is it?" He straightened, finding some remnant of his military bearing. "I failed the most basic principle of leadership integrity. I let you carry my lie while your own family mocked your service. That's not excessive. It's accountability." "What about Ryan?" Peter's face tightened. "Ryan's at your parents' house. Has been drinking since you left. Your father tried to talk to him, but..." He trailed off. "But Ryan only ever listened to you. Which is why I'm going there next, to tell him the truth, all of it. That his failure wasn't weakness, just unsuitability. that his sister's success doesn't diminish him, that he needs to find his own truth instead of living in my shadow. He won't hear it. Maybe not tonight, but I have to try. Peter shifted, uncomfortable. Clara, there's something else. Something not in those papers. I waited. The mission before Iron Veil. February. You flew cover for a Delta Force operation. My spine stiffened. That mission was beyond classified. I'm not supposed to know about it, he continued. But operators talk. You took missile damage, lost hydraulics, and still completed the mission. Landed a destroyed bird at night with no instruments. How do you... Because the Delta commander wanted to put you in for a Silver Star. Got overruled because the mission didn't officially exist. He met my eyes. How many other times? Clara. How many other missions that we'll never know about? Enough. And you never said anything. Never used it as leverage. Never threw it in Ryan's face when he insulted you. I thought silence was strength, I said. Turns out it was just silence. Peter reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. This was my grandfather's. World War II, flew B-17s over Germany. 35 missions when the average survival was 15. He opened the box. Inside was a pair of silver wings, aged and worn. I've carried these through every deployment, every mission. They reminded me that courage comes in different forms. I was going to give them to Ryan, but... He held out the box. They belong to someone who actually understands what they mean. I can't... You should. He placed the box on the floor between us. Your grandfather would have understood you. Clara. The quiet ones who fly into hell and come home to silence, they're the real warriors. He turned to leave, then paused. I'm going to make this right. Not just the paperwork, not just the recognition. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. I don't need everyone to know. No, he said, looking back. But Ryan does. Your parents do. And I need to be the one to tell them, fully and completely, how badly I failed you and how magnificently you succeeded despite that failure. He walked away down the hotel corridor, footsteps echoing. I picked up the box, opened it again. The wings caught the light, and I could almost imagine them on a young man's chest, flying through flak over Germany, coming home to a world that would celebrate him as a hero. Different war, different silence. I closed the box and went back inside. On the desk, the envelope Peter had left felt heavier than it should. Inside were 2 years of truth waiting to be told. But I realized, standing there in that sterile hotel room, that I didn't need those papers to validate who I was. I'd already spoken my truth. The rest was just paperwork. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Please come home. Ryan needs you. I stared at it for a long moment. Ryan needed me. After years of dismissing me, mocking me, diminishing me now, he needed me. I typed back, Ryan needs to face himself. I'm done being his mirror. Then I turned off the phone, put on my flight jacket, and walked out onto the balcony. The ocean stretched black under the stars, and somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, was the sky I'd conquered. Tomorrow, Peter would tell his truth. Ryan would face his lies. My parents would reckon with their blindness. But tonight, I just stood there, holding my grandfather's wings and my own hard-earned silence, finally understanding the difference between being quiet and being silenced. The ceremony at MacDill Air Force Base was everything military precision demanded. Crisp October morning, flags snapping in the Gulf breeze, rows of dress uniforms reflecting the Florida sun. The base commander had insisted on making it an event media present, full honor guard, the works. I stood at attention as they read the citation, my family in the front row looking like strangers at their own revelation. Mom clutched Dad's arm. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw working. And Ryan stood apart from them, in civilian clothes, shoulders bent under the weight of his dissolved mythology. For extraordinary heroism and distinguished service during Operation Iron Veil, The words washed over me, but I was watching Peter Graves in his dress blues, reading the recommendation he should have written 2 years ago. His voice never wavered, even when describing how I'd saved his life. Captain Monroe demonstrated exceptional courage, superior airmanship, and complete disregard for personal safety in successfully executing the most dangerous close air support mission in recent naval special warfare history. Master Chief Tate stood with 6 other SEALs, all at attention, all wearing their tridents, all there for me. The press photographers couldn't get enough of it, the female pilot being honored by the Navy's elite. Actions reflected great credit upon herself, the United States Air Force, and the Joint Special Operations community. The base commander stepped forward with the medal, not just the Distinguished Flying Cross I'd already earned, but the Silver Star somehow. They'd pushed through the recognition for that classified Delta mission too. As he pinned it to my uniform, he whispered, "Long overdue, Captain." Then came the moment I hadn't expected. The 7 SEALs broke formation, and one by one, they approached. Each removed their trident pin, the symbol they'd bled to earn, and pressed it into my hand. "Tradition," Tate explained to the confused crowd. "When a SEAL dies, we pound our tridents into their coffin. Captain Monroe died for us up there, flew herself into the ground, pulled G's that should have killed her. She just happened to survive. So we give them to her now, while she can know what they mean. 7 tridents, 7 lives, 7 debts paid. Peter Graves was last." He approached not with a trident, but with his grandfather's wings now mounted in a shadow box with a plaque, "For the quiet warriors who fly through hell and come home to silence." From one warrior family to another, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then the formal part ended, and I had to face them, my parents, who'd driven up in confusion and shame, and Ryan, who looked like a ghost of his former self. Mom reached me first, tears streaming. "Clara, I'm so—" "Don't," I said gently. "Just see me now. That's enough." Dad couldn't speak. He just pulled me into a hug that felt like an apology and a recognition all at once. And then there was Ryan. He stood before me, this broken brother who'd built his identity on sand. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face gaunt from 2 days of reckoning. "I was wrong," he said, voice barely audible. The crowd had dispersed enough to give us privacy, but I could feel them watching the press, the officers, the SEALs. "I know." "No," he said, stronger now. "I wasn't just wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. About what strength looks like. About what service means. About who deserves respect." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, showed me the screen. It was his Instagram, his Facebook, his entire social media presence where he'd played soldier all deleted. "I'm closing the gyms," he continued. "Can't build warriors when I never was one." "Ryan, let me finish." He straightened, finding some dignity in his confession. "You flew into hell for strangers. You saved lives while I was playing dress-up. And when you came home, I mocked you for it." He did something then that I'd never seen him do. He came to attention, not the sloppy civilian version he'd been doing for years, but proper attention. Peter must have taught him. And then my brother, who'd never properly earned the right, gave me a perfect military salute. "Now I know what real military looks like," he said, voice breaking. "It looks like you." I returned the salute, held it for a moment, then dropped it. "Find your own path, Ryan, your real one." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of jets taking off from the flight line, F-16s, like the ones I'd flown into that canyon. The crowd began dispersing, but the SEALs remained, forming a protective circle around this moment of family reckoning. As we stood there, my parents finally seeing their daughter, my brother finally seeing himself, and me finally visible in my own story, Master Chief Tate approached one last time. "Captain Monroe," he said formally, then dropped his voice. "Clara, the team wanted me to tell you something." "What's that?" "Every year on the anniversary of Iron Veil, We raise a glass to the pilot who brought us home. We've been doing it in secret. Now we can do it properly. He smiled. You're officially invited to the next one. The sun climbed higher, warming the tarmac, turning the morning into something bright and uncompromising. I stood there in my uniform, silver star and distinguished flying cross catching the light, 7 tridents in my pocket. My family's recognition finally won. The war for visibility was over. I'd won it not with weapons or anger, but with truth. And as the camera crews packed up and the crowd dispersed, as my family prepared to drive home to a new understanding, as the SEALs headed back to their endless training, I heard it again carried on the wind like a battle cry turned benediction, respect, Captain. This time, I didn't just hear it. I owned it. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your perspectives and experiences make these stories richer for our entire community.